I'm Julie McIntyre, and I begin by acknowledging Aboriginal nations and Torres Strait Islanders as the first peoples of Australia. I express my gratitude to the Awabakal and northern neighbouring Worimi peoples for their custodianship of the lands and waters where I live and work. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. Thank you to Liz Connor for conceiving of and executing this outstanding event, Amy Cook for her patience and expertise, and I look forward to meeting you in the forum. This paper is concerned with the existence of coal at Mullumbimba, Newcastle, in Awabakal country on the southern shores of Cocoon, the Hunter River, and at neighbouring Lake Macquarie, where there's a site whose name Nikkinba translates from Awabakal language as place of coal. The rise and fall of sea levels means that in geological and archaeological terms as coastal peoples, the most recent phase of Awabakal antiquity in the place of coal and environs dates to 6,000 years ago. From the 1790s, members of the military garrison of the colony of New South Wales first chanced upon visible coal deposits in rock formations, after which the well-documented mining of those coal deposits began. It's not possible to speak exclusively of a coal-fired colonialism in Awabakal country. From early colonial times, red cedar trees and Aboriginal shell middens were also turned into objects of trade. Yet, as is also well documented, the modern economy, society and environment of Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and the wider Hunter region has been shaped materially and culturally by its vast coal deposits. What's little known within and beyond the region is the entanglement of Awabakal with colonists and settlers' commodification of coal, from its role in their traditions to its role in contributing to the transformation of Awabakal people and country since the turn of the 19th century. The region's coal is of diverse types as a result of being formed when Australia was yet to break away from the massive supercontinent of Gondwanaland, shift northward and arrive in its present latitude and longitude. Various compression events of parent flora in swamps and lagoons in the late Permian era, some 2008 to 245 million years ago. The relative shallow depth of the region's coal deposits is due to its location at the fringe of the wider Sydney Basin, and weathering has contributed to the relative accessibility of coal for mining. Statistics on export quality black coal extraction in Australia from 1860 to 1983 indicate that the colony and then the state of New South Wales was the primary source of coal as a commodity in Australia. For the most part, private companies first mined coal seams visible in rock formations, gradually opening up Awabakal country by disrupting its upper soil layers and life forms, and over time extending to Wanneroo country and other ancestral lands of clans. Today, coal is freighted by rail into Awabakal country to the port of Newcastle, which handles more coal exports than any other harbour in the world. My approach to decolonising this history is to turn with ways of knowing about coal as a fossil deposit for extraction, commodification and consumption towards incorporating histories of place and First Peoples. Decolonisation is a methodology that repositions Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and others with epistemological equivalence. In this way of thinking, no belief system or way of working is privileged, all are valued and respected, and Indigenous voices are central to the construction and transmission of new interpretations of the past. My case study is in 3 parts. This presentation focuses on the first of these, reconnecting the place of coal with the Awabakal peoples. There are lengthy quotes as I'm refining my decolonising objective of hearing Indigenous voices rather than my own in this case study. That's a really interesting challenge. First, John Maynard, a Worimi man and pathbreaking Aboriginal historian, has recorded that, quote, the Awabakal are believed to be the only Aboriginal clan to discuss coal in their dreaming stories. They were aware of its combustibility and used lumps of it in their fires, end quote. Maynard reports that the old people of the Awabakal made coal, and here I'm quoting from him again, a very long time ago when the earth and sea were different to today, and a great darkness fell that caused fear. Even the birds, insects and animals fell silent. Messages were dispatched in every direction, bringing all of the people together to make a decision on how the light of the world could be restored. The wise men of the tribe decided that the only way the world could be brought back from the depths of darkness was to cover up the source of darkness that was scattered deeply on the ground. Men, women, and children dug up rocks and sand and broke down foliage from trees and bushes to cover up the thick darkness, which was breaking through the surface of the earth. The people feared that the ever-burning fires deep in the ground would release the darkness again. After the darkness was covered over, generations passed in which the people walked on the ground, pressing the darkness and flames together under the earth to become Nikin or coal. Now, whenever coal is burned, the spirit of the ancient fire is again released. And that's the totality of the passage from Maynard. This perspective is largely overlooked in histories of Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and coal that foreground colonists and coal in the political economy of empire and in cultural histories of coal and the region. There is fleeting linguistic treatment of connections between Awabakal peoples and coal in Anne Keary's research on the relationship between Reverend Lancelot Threlkeld of the London Missionary Society, who was based from the 1820s to 30s at Newcastle and Lake Macquarie. Sustained conversations between Awabakal leader Biraban and Threlkeld, which Keary argues took the form of Biraban teaching Threlkeld, resulted in highly significant records of Awabakal language and culture. Maynard has connected the role of Percy Haslam, a non-Aboriginal journalist and scholar responsible for drawing new attention to the linguistic and cultural documents created by Threlkeld about the Awabakal. The archives and publications of the intellectual connection between Biraban, Threlkeld, Haslam and Maynard in Awabakal country are central to my case study. Biraban's voice as he taught Threlkeld is layered in this extract from Threlkeld's notes that visually position Awabakal history in place. And I'm reading again rather extensively here from Threlkeld's material in this instance. On the northern extremity of the eastern side of Lake Macquarie, there is a bluff, at the foot of which are two upright rocks of the conglomerate kind, which the Aborigines, have named Mulang Bula. The tradition believed in by the Orthodox blacks in regard to the two rocks is that a certain black man, from causes unknown to prosperity but supposed to be trivial, beat two women most unmercifully to death. These women were instantly transformed into the two upright rocky pillars about 3 meters high, which Threlkeld knew to exist at the place you can see here. Beneath the base of the two pillars, there is a projecting seam of excellent coal of the caking description, and not like the seam in other parts of the lake, which is technically called open burning coal, from not having the quality of caking so as to form cinder, but burning with a bright flame, throwing out a great heat and burning to a greyish ash. Lake Macquarie coal, with its millions and millions of tonnes, this is Threlkeld continuing, approachable on the surface level, may be found of some use as an auxiliary to the steam navigation in these colonies. And he says, the blacks called Lake Macquarie Nikkinba, from Nikin coal and bar, the place of, meaning a place of coal. So what you can see here on the slide is a place that it's Nikkinba, and it's also known as Reed's Mistake. The colonist associated with finding this treasure of coal is Reed, a marine captain who mistook this entrance to Lake Macquarie for Newcastle Harbour, and hence the settler name. Threlkeld continues, 3 or 4 miles by water from this place, there is another point called by the Aborigines Mununkan. Underneath this point, there crops out a seam of canal coal, beneath which there is a seam of superior common coal. Both jet into the sea in 3 or 4 fathoms of water. And what Threlkeld explains is the government surveyor and a representative of the Australian Agricultural Company in that place found 2 coal veins of nearly 3 metres in thickness and the coal of excellent quality. Threlkeld further bequeaths a vivid picture of the fabric of Awabakal and more than human nature at the place of coal at the time of colonial arrival, describing a small island in the vicinity called Niritiba, the place of mutton birds. At one time of the year, Threlkeld tells us the blacks go to this island and feast on the eggs and young ones of the mutton bird, which they esteem as highly as my Lord Duke does his pheasant, and which mutton birds are guarded by certain laws, perhaps more stringent than those of the game in England, where transportation is the statute penalty, whilst, and Threlkeld saying this is among the Awabakal, death is the punishment against the blacks for those who transgress their common law. This evokes Nikkinba as a place of mutual survival for First Peoples and mutton birds. Moving forward in time to the early 1900s, Haslam spent several years in close contact with surviving Awabakal at the edge of Lake Macquarie. So this is Percy Haslam, who was the journalist and later scholar who recovered our understanding of Threlkeld and Birrabban. This is Haslam later in life. So in the early 1900s, when Haslam was a small boy, he spent several years in close contact with surviving Awabakal at the edge of Lake Macquarie. These people were Burntree, Goomera, and Yalakala. Haslam went on bush trips around Swansea, Cooranbong, Martinsville, and Mandalong. From the age of 8, he says he was taught the language and claimed to have been put through Awabakal ceremonies when he was about 12 years of age and given the name Pepita, which means little hawk. Haslam learned to hunt duck, especially well, which later proved useful in providing for his large and poor family during the Depression. Black and white peoples spoke Awabakal in the district in the 1870s and 1880s. Then suddenly, Haslam accounts, these people seemingly disappeared overnight, forced to move because of commercial interests in their land. The Forestry Commission had begun moving into their areas to meet large timber orders from New Zealand and South Africa to make piles and railway sleepers. The time frame of the disappearance that Haslam describes of the Awabakal is hazy, but appears to be in the 1910s. So the second part of my completed paper is to provide a deeper account of coal mining and transport to the 1820s to juxtapose Awabakal land management from those of colonisers, drawing upon traditional historical evidence such as records of the colonial administration and newspaper reports, as well as archives of place, landscape and peoples to emphasise the transformation of the Awabakal and their place of coal. The third part is asynchronous but essential to my decolonising purpose. In the 1970s, with Haslam as an ally, the Awabakal community became actively involved in opposing mining and land development that threatened Aboriginal sites of significance. And this is Maynard explaining this part of the history. And they pushed for Aboriginal involvement with environmental impact statements. The Awabakal raised their voices against releasing the spirit of the ancient fire. Unlike colonisers, who applied Western scientific knowledge of coal to realise their expectations of capital surplus value from extraction and use value along the capital value chain, using coal to provide intimate heating and warmth and energy to power the reproduction of their introduced ways. Coal mining is a source of employment for Aboriginal people, and the modernisation of energy enmeshed Awabakal in a coal economy and society. So in conclusion, Grace Karskens and Mark McKenna demonstrate that histories of place restore understanding of Indigenous Australia before colonisation and of the entanglement of colonised and colonisers since 1788. And as Anne McGrath states, places, people and landscapes are living archival repositories that allow a writing of First Peoples' long and deep histories outside the time and space of colonisation. As Anya Lumba has stated, colonialism reshapes, often violently, physical territories and social terrains, as well as human identities. Lumba wrote this in the early 2000s, reckoning with the resilience of colonial institutions such as capitalism in anti-colonial nationalisms, when post-colonial theorists were hostile to historical theories of capitalisation for their erasure of First Peoples from the social system of capital value production. In attempting to surmount ontological and epistemological divides between activist or critical modes of scholarship, Jason Moore has very recently repositioned the problem of human-induced climate change and concurrent environmental catastrophes, such as mass species extinction, as related to the theft by colonisers of Indigenous lands and the structuring of the world's human and more than human populations into capitalisation. Moore terms this era of the embedding of a co-constitution of humans and more than human nature in a world ecology as what he calls the Capitalocene. Moore's Capitalocene is temporally and spatially synonymous with the age of European empires, since the establishment of the Iberian extraction industries in the Atlantic Islands in the 15th century. And Moore's model allows the important re-entangling of First Peoples and the forced migration of enslaved peoples, more than human ecologies, and commodity production. The recursive structuring and restructuring of capital value production as a system dependent on what Moore calls cheap natures, and also, as he points out, expelling women, Indigenous peoples, Africans, and many others from conceptions of humanity. Thinking with Moore's theory of the Capitalocene, the arrival of colonists at Awabakal and Nikkinba occurred late in the midpoint of capital's circuit of expanded reproduction. Again, that's Moore's phrase. Decolonizing the relationship between Awabakal peoples and Cole seeks to recall Biraban and others known by Haslam, and to continue Haslam's quest, as reported by Maynard, to see, quote, Indigenous culture preserved and maintained as a living rather than a museum species. Newcastle and Lake Macquarie's early history of coal mining and commodification was not only the nascence of an industry in the Capitalocene, it caused acute rupture for Awabakal people and country. Thank you.